Hi, everyone, and welcome to Dare to Care with Michelle, the place where we don't talk about why to care, but how to care. With us today is a returning visitor, Maggie Ortiz. Maggie's a 23-year veteran in critical care nursing. And then, besides her clinical work, she's also was an investigator for the nursing board. And now she champions nurses who are facing the licensing boards and investigations. She is a vocal activist for legislative reform, addressing issues like healthcare worker violence and safe staffing. Maggie is believes that education is the key in the approach, and she empowers nurses through webinars, classes, mentorship, and vital skills for effective charting. She has an amazing class right now about charting. We'll talk about that. Maggie's passion isn't for nursing; it's for nurses. She is a true advocate. She is dedicated to uplifting and educating her community. Everyone say hello to my friend Maggie Ortiz. Hi, Maggie.
Hey, sister. Thank you,
It's
thank you, thank you.
so exciting to have you back. Your episode was so well received by my coworkers at a local hospital here in Las Vegas. They absolutely ate every word up, and in fact, when I started my membership, I reached out to you to say, "Hey, do you want to be one of my experts? Because my people love you, and we love you, and we're so glad you're here."
Thank you, thank you. Oh, that makes me, and that's why I'm here. That's why I'm called to, what did you say? Nurses. That's
Yes.
called to.
I think, it feels like as we get older into the nursing profession, and I always thought I was called to be a nurse. I've always been a nurse. This is what I've always been. But as I've gotten further into the profession, I'm more and more reaching toward the nurses, especially these baby nurses who are reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, this doctor just yelled at me," and you'll see them posted on Facebook. This doctor said blah blah blah. And then the other nurses that I see, what do they say? Oh, well, that's just the way it is. And that's not the way it is. So you want to speak to that a little bit, my friend?
I would. And I think that is true. I think that when we're first starting out, and like you said, the baby nurses, and no disrespect, I know some of the nurses don't like to be called that. So the newer nurses, being PC, politically correct, that you're not comfortable with even who you are as a nurse at that point. And then as we get longer in that career, we're not tolerating that. I'm not no longer to tolerate a physician speaking to me that manner. Does that happen? It does, but that doesn't mean we have to normalize it. Something's happening. I worked in the cath lab as a critical care setting. It's stressful. Someone's dying, something's happening, right? And someone raises their voice, yells, it gets tense. As long as they're not calling me a name, don't make it personal, buddy. I get it. You're yelling, give me a 3 hour JR. I understand. Oh, yes. And you don't take that offensively because context is matters as well.
Right.
What was the situation that was happening? Well, we're doing CPR on the patient. Okay, well, that is a little different. Let's talk about that for a minute. Again, don't make it personal. Don't call me a name. Don't say the, B word or whatever, but they were being direct. And sometimes then you may have to help the new nurse unpack that. I know
Yeah.
that feels ugly. I know that doesn't feel good. I know they were yelling at you, and it is okay for you to go to them and just say, outside of that event, is that, I mean, I felt like he yelled at me and it didn't feel good. And maybe next time, I know it was stressful that, you could say it like this, but then you help them unpack that. If it is straight up, they're yelling at you, being disrespectful, there is none of that happening, then we don't allow that. You again correct that behavior immediately, and or you get your charge nurse or your nurse manager, and then that physician gets spoken to once, and then the next time that should be, you are allowed to report that to the medical board. Am I about that life? I am not. Right. And I hope that you are able to go to your peer, and I hope that a doctor is receptive to that. But if they're not, you do have to take that up the chain of command.
Yeah. And the main thing is taking it up the chain of command. Giving a lot of times they just feel like there's nothing that can be done and they just accept. And it's just talk to the doctor. You're right. Say, you know what you said? You were kind of harsh. And I was doing the best that I could. But it's also a matter of everybody has to play nice in the sandbox.
Yes. But it's also setting your boundaries. When I've set my boundaries, And sometimes the provider doesn't know you. And when I've been a travel nurse, the first thing that I do, I'm in an emergency room, I'm working in the ER. I walk over to the staff doctors. Hey, my name is Maggie. I'm one of the newer travelers here, just to give them just my 2 minute. Because again, we're in a relationship now. There is a level of trust. I'm taking care of your patients. So I've been a nurse for 10 years, whatever, just so that they know this is what I bring to the table. There's nothing wrong with that. I shake their hand just like I shake the patient's hand. When I walk into the patient's room, hi, sir or ma'am, if they're awake in an ICU, right? Probably not going to be doing that, but then that's the family. My name is Maggie. Thank you for allowing me to take care of you.
Yeah.
Right. Set a tone, set your boundaries. You're a professional, behave like one.
Yeah. I even do that as a house supervisor. If we get a new doctor in the ER and I'll walk in and, I just say, hi, I'm Michelle. Let me know what's going on. Keep me in the loop. You got a patient that's kind of sick. Don't wait until you admit it and then say, hey, I need this ICU patient out quick. Let me know. Let's all, because the ultimate goal is patient safety,
Right.
and yes, while being called to nurses and being called to take care of the nurses, which is what you and I do, is the ultimate goal is patient safety. If the nurses don't feel safe, if the nurses don't feel protected, they can't do the best that they can.
Or if they can't even communicate, if you're shutting down communication by you're yelling at me, you know what you just did cause that patient harm. What does Joint Commission say? Why have we created things like SBAR communication? Why did Joint Commission and CMS have to get involved? Because it's a problem in our world. Patient safety goal number 2 or 3, right? Communication. 98,000 people die from us annually, right? Per the patient safety, third leading cause of death in the nation prior to COVID, 10th in the world. According to World Health Organization, you know what the crux comes down to? Our inability to communicate on so many levels. And it's not just because of that, but now you yelled at me, you screamed at me, the last person I'm ever going to come to, not only because of this patient, but every patient after this.
Exactly. Yeah. And I work night shift weekends. And so those nurses are terrified to call those doctors. Oh, if I call Dr. Johnson, he's going to yell at me and I don't want to get yelled at. Okay, so let's not let the doctor know the potassium is 2. That's very low, by the way, for those of you who are not in the medical field.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about possible arrhythmias. When we do lethal injection, we're doing the opposite of. When you have low potassium as well, your body can have a reaction, just like if you have too much of it. So you can have a lethal or deadly arrhythmia, and you can die from that. So it's concerning.
Maggie, what motivated you to become an advocate for nurses?
Sure. So like in my bio, you mentioned that I spent some time at a board of nursing. So prior to doing that, I had been practicing for 15 years, right? You talked about my experience, ICU, ER, so I'd critical care. I'd spent my life, right, in a hospital setting or surgery setting, sitting next to people that, were competent. And then when I go to the board and I was, seeing things that were common sense, like how is a criminal investigator investigating something related to a practice, something that I had to go to nursing school for. If a nurse committed a crime, a DUI, yes, sure, I could see a criminal investigator investigating that. That's solid. But now she gave potassium or didn't give it. You're a criminal investigator. What is your knowledge base? You just explained that for the audience because they're not a nurse. So why is that any different from the criminal investigator who doesn't have that body of knowledge? So I was like, huh. And then I was seeing some other things. And then I chose not to stay. I only stayed for about 6 months. And then I became a civil expert. So under like medical malpractice. So then what did I learn? Due process. Then I started seeing, I was like, wait. So we do it here in civil cases where due process happens. There has to be an expert. Some things start coming to me, just common sense. And then I become an administrative expert helping nurses in their legal system. And then I'd see in this administrative law, and for those who don't hold a nursing license, but if you hold any license, you fall under administrative law, 3 types of law: civil, criminal, administrative. If you hold any professional license, real estate agent, social, whatever it is, you practice administrative law. So I was seeing that was different than civil law, and I couldn't figure out why. And so I started studying up administrative law, and then I saw, so it's the example I use, it's like if there's a federal law, each state then has to adopt its own laws and reference in accordance to that. They are allowed, that's their right. It's the state's right to make their own rules. Same with administrative law. So what do? They are given that, and then they're allowed to oversee themselves. And then there's no accountability. They write their own rules and regulations, and then they hold themselves accountable. So it just changed me. And we're seeing nurses not being extended what I now know to be due process. And I wanted that to change. And I made some change in my own state. I introduced myself to, some learning. I had to study up on administrative law, like I talked about. And, I'm going to go to law school now because like you said, I'm called to nurses, not to nursing.
I am amazed by you going to law school. That's just, I just can't
Well, it
even
was an
imagine.
ER doctor that called me out. So I'm speaking to a mentor. So, and she's telling me someone I'm in awe of. She's done a TED talk, all this stuff. I'm even in awe. I'm like on a Zoom with her, right? And she's like, Maggie, you're amazing what you're doing. And she's like, I want you to talk to this ER doctor. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I think it's, great. So I follow up, and I'm always trying to be respectful of people's time. So I have my 2-minute elevator speech, right? And
Right.
so I get done with that. He's like, so you're in law school? And I was like, nope, sir, I'm old. And he was just like, are you kidding me? Uses the F word. He's like, I'm 73 and I just graduated. And I was like, okay. I said, so the LSAT, he's like, the test? He was like, are you joking me? He's like, is that your real answer? He's like, are those your real answers, Maggie? And I was like, what? This is like 2 weeks ago. And I was like, yes. He was like, you're a warrior. He's like, you're clearly called to something bigger to yourself. You're just missing the messages. So why are you not going to law school again? And I was like, well, I think you got some valid points here, sir. So, and I've been tiptoeing around it, inquiring. So now I know I got to do it. I'm studying up for the LSAT, doing Khan Academy. And it is true. It is a test. I mean, nursing is one of the hardest degrees. You look it up in the Guinness World Book, the Bachelor of Science in Nursing is the hardest degree.
Right.
I just have to get that. And you talk about this and all your mindfulness, and just to move, pivoting onto that, it is your mindset. If I tell myself I can't do this, then you know what I can't do?
You can't do it. Yeah. And I have zero doubt that you 100% can. You are just amazing and so much knowledge. We talk about oh my gosh, there's so much to unpack. I asked my chat GPT, I'm like, what are some questions I can ask Maggie? And it gave me like 50. And I was like, well, I'm not going to have that much time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just,
So read a couple, like read the first 5, and maybe I can like create like a paragraph where I could honestly address some of those because some of them are common ones and then we'll cross over.
yeah, I am interested in your thoughts on addressing health violence in healthcare.
Sure. So it's a problem. Every other nurse is assaulted. That's 2 an hour. Where to start on this? I do think that we need to have things in place. And I did have the opportunity to meet with Mel Cortez. I actually sat down with her. She has come up with a program, and some of the common sense things that I didn't even think about, that she was saying, like, if you have a patient possibly that was demented, is the example that she gave, and they're maybe acting out sexually inappropriately towards the nurse, and maybe taking their head, putting it towards their groin, and you're trying to like move them or they're standing. She's like, well, if you put their hands on the side rail, what did you just do? And I'm like, wow. And that cost the organization what? $0. And you know what? That just gave me confidence, some tools, right?
Yeah.
So it's a problem. I think I'm sure you know about the Dallas nurse and social worker that got shot in the face. I was madder than a hornet. I called one of those representative's office who was who represented that hospital, and maybe tore in a little bit to the person who answered the phone. But this young lady, and thankfully so, reminded me that the only reason why there was even an officer in this building was because of this representative. And I said, why is it that the Dallas stadium has metal detectors, but the hospital doesn't, where we have vulnerable people strapped to beds? This wasn't a labor and delivery unit. And you're telling me, and no disrespect to this young man, he was coming to see his child, but he had an ankle bracelet on. And I'm sorry, but there are vulnerable people in this building. If you have an ankle bracelet on and you're involved with the law right now, you don't get to come into this building where you have vulnerable people. Had there been at minimum a metal detector, that he would have been stopped and maybe even frisked, they would have found the gun on him, the weapon on him at that time, right? And he would not been able, and 2 people would still be living today.
it amazes me. There's so much that nurses, I am not ever blaming nurses for violence in healthcare, and you are
Good.
not either.
Correct.
But there's so much that nurses can do to protect themselves that they don't. I walked into a room that had a sitter, a one-on-one patient. Why is he a one-on-one? Because he's violent. Okay, well, first of all, that's sad that we've got somebody sitting in the room with a violent patient. But I walked into the room and she's sitting between the bed and the wall and not by the door. And I said, what are you doing? I said, and I got the charge nurse. I'm the house supervisor. I just make rounds.
Right.
And I got the charge nurse and I said, this is a never event. I should never see a sitter sitting on the other side. This for me is a never event because now 2 days later, that same patient punched a CNA in the face.
See.
Now that
Mm-mm.
CNA was posted on the correct side of the bed. What if he was posted over in the corner?
That could have been war, and you know this. You absolutely, and explain that for the audience. That means not getting up. That means now I'm not I can't reach a code button. Who am I going to call? Who am I going to call?
Yeah, yeah,
No, I like that you automatically corrected that because that does, and sometimes it is just a lack of education. And I've seen before even where, like even like that, I'll be relieving another nurse and I'm like, why are there cords in here on this suicidal patient? What is happening right now? No, 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 we can't have this. This is putting that patient at risk, and you and your license and what you're documenting and not documenting right here, and you talked about like the checks, like that, what that, I mean, I don't understand how that education training knowledge is not in their file.
yeah. I 100%. And then at certain hospitals, and I will say mine is one of them. And there's a big sign up in the ER that says violence against healthcare workers will not be tolerated. And so the first time that we had an incident after I saw that, my husband said, "Well, didn't they read the sign?"
Well, and then who's reported? So then it comes down to, because it was brought to my attention that health system here put it into place because there was some new law that was passed in Texas. But then I found out because it was brought up at this meeting, and I was with lawyers. This is a meeting like with risk management. It's open to the public.
Mhm.
Um, and the person that was coming from the organization was saying that the nurse was assaulted. There was a police report, but then the nurse had to put their home address on the.
Oh, shut up.
I was like, wait. I stood up. I was like, no, wait, I can't. I'm so sorry. I got to stand up. I apologize. I said, no. And of course, the nurse didn't. Then the nurse was, and that's what she's saying. And the nurse decided she didn't want to, because they were saying, why can't you put the hospital address on here? Why do you can have my phone, but that patient gets that information with my personal address on that, my home address on that. And I was like, why don't we need to change that? So it was the lead counsel for the hospital. And I was like, so what are you doing about that? Because that has to change. You need to figure that out. Go back to the table and figure it out. But why would I file a report if you're going to write my home address on that?
I would not. And I'm all for, I'm always, anytime one of the nurses do get assaulted, which happens far too often, I do, let's call the police, and so many of them tell me no, and I'm just like, oh.
I know. I've been there.
The only
Yeah.
really good thing I can do is once in a while I'll get one and I'll say, what happens if that's me? You know, or what happens if it's one of these little 20-year-old tiny Filipino girls? Or what happens if it's someone else? Yes, you can handle it. Why, but why do you have to?
Right. And that's what I tell nurses about. It's not about today, it's about tomorrow. And we've done the same thing repeatedly for how long? And if we want things to change, we have these things in place now. And if we don't do these, is it uncomfortable? It is. Does anyone want to report a patient? No. No, but am I not a person? Do I not have rights? I mean, am I not valued enough? There has to be a line between holding people accountable, them being sick, and understanding that. But why isn't that onus on the organization? If someone's assaulted, why is it on me, Maggie, to file that report? Why isn't it automatically, were you not assaulted in building A? Then that's like HR leadership, that's an automatic. Why?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Or
Interesting.
even if they come to the nurse and the nurse says yes or no, if the nurse says, yes, I want to do it, then it's not me, Maggie, who does that. They do still give me the option whether I want to do it, but then it's them who does it. And it's, you know what I mean? It's not me.
Right. Right. Yeah. 100%. That's um so moving on to the next subject that chat gave us. Uh
Yeah.
safe staffing.
Woo, I love this one.
Oh boy. This is
Woo.
a scary one.
It is. It is. And so we'll tie this and patient abandonment together because I get this oftentimes because the nurse will be told that they're abandoning the patient when the leadership hasn't, paid attention to the schedule. So let's unpack that. Is it illegal or is it a violation of the Nurse Practice Act to take an unsafe assignment? It is. So if you actually look at the actual language, you're supposed to be part of that. In my state, Texas, that's 217.11 1 and T, and that's under standards of practice. And so what it basically says is the person making the assignment and then me accepting the assignment. So that's, that piece. You have to only accept an assignment that is, what you consider to be safe. That's so border nursing. Then I'll give you an example. I went to a district meeting for the Nurses Association in my state. The lawyer for the association was there, one of them. And I had met him down at the Capitol. So he, of course, knew who I was. And so I was like, oh, me. And they love when I ask questions. So I'm like, so sir, we're talking about pay and staffing. So I would like to talk about staffing here for a minute. So if I work, let's just say in the ICU and I knowingly and willingly take on, let's say a third patient, it's 2-to-1 in the ICU, but I take on that third patient because they quote unquote make me. Is that the definition of medical malpractice? Yes. Gasped in the audience. I said, sir, will you please repeat that for the nurses? If you knowingly and willingly, because they're not holding a gun to your head, take on an unsafe assignment, is that the definition of a medical malpractice? It is. It sure is.
That's so interesting. And here in Vegas, they have a form. It's called the ADO, and I think you and I talked about it a little bit before. But it's called an assignment despite objection. I know that this assignment isn't safe, but I'm accepting it despite my objection.
And who does that go to, Michelle?
The nurse fills that out, and it goes to the manager. And I keep
outside of the building. Who does that? Is this something that's generated by the Board of Nursing?
No, right.
Correct. There's
Right.
only 2 places that have safe harbor that is actually law by the Board of Nursing. What you just mentioned is something that's done by the National Relations Board, that's done with a union, that's filed with like the hospital association. Who cares? You know what I care about? What is the language of the Board of Nursing says? Because you cannot stand in front of the Board of Nursing in Nevada and say, but I filled out despite just an ADO form. Oh, great. We'd love to see that because we want to know all what you said you doing wrong. We would love to see that, but that doesn't protect you from the Board of Nursing. Because you still took the assignment. So that doesn't absolve you from any litigation, civil, criminal, or administrative. You're just saying, I don't even know. And for the National Relations Board, I think that goes to, and I don't know enough about this form, but that's because that's a union form, correct?
Yeah, we were originally union when I first started working, and the union's gone now. So what is interesting is is that then the charge nurse will take it and say, well, here's what I tried to do. And the charge nurse maybe has been a nurse for 6 months, or maybe she's been a nurse for 30 years. Maybe, it could be either one.
Yes.
I do
so much in that sense. Where to start?
I take ADO seriously. And if somebody actually does give me one, I say, okay, well, let's figure out what we can do.
Yes.
Rather than turn this in.
Yes.
Let's figure out what we can do to make it a safe assignment.
Yes, I think that's appropriate. And I don't know if you should go right to that form without like talking. So, and help me out with that. So if it was me, it seems like I would start with if I was like, oh, wait, hold on. Let's get the charge nurse over here. This is not safe. That's why I would start with charge. Then we're going, depending again, it could be night shift. So nurse manager's not there. Who's my next? It's Michelle. It's the house soup. Let's call the house soup down. Now I'm going to try to resolve that then. But now if you say, as Michelle say, I stop it. I'm not helping you. then I would have to fill out an ADO. But I don't understand, why are they by stepping that step?
Yeah, it depends. My guys are pretty good about now. I'm around. I walk, walk,
Yeah,
walk. So they see me all the time. So they'll be like, it's so crazy. Is there anything you can do? And sometimes it's a matter of sometimes there's nothing I can do. you
right.
know, and then sometimes my stepdad was in the hospital recently over Thanksgiving, and it was an 11-to-1 ratio
On
in
what
St.
kind of
Louis,
unit?
a
On what?
med tele med surge.
Oh my gosh. In like a hospital setting.
Yeah, because I that was my first thought was, is this like rehab?
That's exactly what I thought you were going to say.
And they gave my mom the code to get into the kitchen to get their own ice and stuff like that. My 70-plus-year-old mom was helping him off and on the bed, helping him to the bathroom, and
See, the really unfortunate part of that is that if your dad would have fallen, you
yeah,
know who the nurse would have, I'm sorry, the nurse would have been negligent,
yeah.
unfortunately. And that's why I tell nurses, I know it's uncomfortable. I know it doesn't feel right, but you can't accept that. You're part of the solution. I can take, so, and you tell me what's an appropriate, because I don't know this answer, honestly. This is a question. On a med tele, what is it 6?
We do 6 to 7 at my
Okay.
hospital, and 7 is pushing them.
Okay. So I would say,
5 to 6.
so I would show up and I would say, I see 11 on the board. So I can't do 11. I can do 6, 7, possibly, depending on the load, because I realize you're asking me to 11. Obviously, we don't have enough people. So, but where's the charge? So I can't, let's be part of this, but you have to stand your ground. Because if you don't, there are nurses, and this is a fact. Now, this is a fact, who've got their ankle bracelet off. So now I'm not talking about the board of nursing, and I'm not talking about civil, correct? I'm talking about criminal. Got their ankle bracelet off because they accepted an unsafe assignment, had never been in the building before, and someone had a bad outcome, and then they were criminally charged. The family can criminally charge you. The family could pick up the phone and call the police. The family's going to pick up the phone and call a medical malpractice lawyer who's going to give them guidance to file a criminal suit against you. And then all that's going to go to the board of nursing. And at some point, you're going to have to, on your at least renewal, say that you're involved in a criminal case.
I will give you a complete heart attack with my mom's situation. They showed her how to turn the IV off when it was beeping.
No, 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 no. Okay, nurses, let me just chime in. Hold on, stop. Hold on. Nurses, right now, stop. Don't ever do this. If you're in a place where you're doing that, pause. And you really need to think about the job that you're at. And then no, because let me just tell you what that means. A civil attorney, watch any nurse's deposition, because they're going to get her on the stand and everyone's going to love her. Everyone is going to, oh my gosh, your husband was awesome. And then we're having you do care. And tell us about this high-tech stuff. And the first questions they're going to ask the nurses that get on the stand is, tell me about your education. Oh, and tell me about IV pumps. Do you have to take training for IV pumps? The nurse doesn't know. They're digging their hole. Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, yes. I have to take all kinds of training and annual training to touch the pump. Oh, tell me more. Digging your hole, digging your hole. And then they're going to ask the nurse, so it says here that Miss Smith said that you taught her how to, but you just said you had training. So I just want to back up. Court reporter, will you go back to page 3, please, and read her sentence? I'm sorry, let's pause here because they're going to make an ass of you. So will you please will you please read back her statement, because she clearly doesn't know what it says. So you read it back to her, please. And
Yeah.
now you're sweating.
I was horrified when I found that out. Like, you have no idea,
Even if you were another nurse, even if I was taking care of your mama and you're like, Maggie, I got this. I'd be like, well, sister, I could get in trouble for this. I know you know how to use this. I got no doubts, but all my boxes are checked in this building. And if you touch this, you could get me in trouble. So honestly, you relax. You spend time. That's not your job, lovey. You're here to be with your mama. You know what I mean? Spend time with your mama. I'm that person. You're not a caretaker right now. And if you need something, you call me and I'm here for you. That's how that should go.
I used to do this because I was an only child growing up. So I tell people, oh, I was an only child. I don't like people playing with my toys.
Exactly.
No, no, please
And
don't
and
touch my toys.
and there it is. And there's another gift we just gave some of the newer nurses, right? Sometimes you just have to offload that to something witty, right? Because again, you're like, I don't know what to say. I don't want to be offensive. I don't know how to handle this. So try to just make it witty, or you just try to twist it a little bit.
Uh, Yeah, it was he's doing better now, but that was quite a visit. And I know it was Thanksgiving. I know some places staffing is terrible on Thanksgiving. My hospital, the nurses love the overtime, the time and a
Yeah.
half. Yeah, but apparently that one they did not. And I just it
And then
was
let's just
interesting.
talk about, so just finishing that thought there. So abandonment, what is abandonment? If you come into your job and you walk out the doors at abandonment and you did not accept an assignment, it can be seen as abandonment. And let me tell you why. Because if you're showing up that you are one of the FTEs, did you give your 2 hour notice? Did you call someone? Did you tell someone? You just didn't give anyone. Now swing that door the other way. That's your mom. Or now I'm your leader. You gave me no time, or you're the leader and I gave you no time. That's not professional. You show up and there's an unsafe assignment. That's when you have to stand your ground to say, I will only be taking care of the 6 patients. I'm not taking the 11, right? Because that's not patient abandonment. If you accept report on a patient and then you don't care for them, that is patient abandonment. If you write out report because you're done and you're not comfortable with this and you just walk out of the building, that is patient abandonment because you did not give report to someone. There was no communication with someone. You're not allowed to walk out of the building and not have given report to someone. So, and as the nurse leader, if you knew 30 days ago, 3 weeks ago, there wasn't enough staff, that is a form of patient abandonment as well, but just on a different level, right? Because my workflow as a staff nurse working 7 to 7 is not the schedule 30 days ago. That was yours and not mine, right? So if I'm showing up and you didn't staff, that's not my emergency, that's yours. And so what did you do? Again, because as an investigator, that's what we asking. Well, let me see the schedule 30 days ago. Well, you had 2 people. So did you call the governor, FEMA? I don't care. Did you go on diversion? Like who did you let know? And some of this I'm not telling you it's right, but in the current state that things are right now, and I'm going to pivot on to something else, is that there are going to be hospital systems that crumble. There will be organizations that crumble, but that's because greed came into our environment, right? We've been saying the same thing since the 30s, 40s, right? Since the Boers have even come around. We've been saying the same things that they have chosen to let like medical devices, big pharma, and insurance companies come into our environment. That is not our fault. So we cannot own what they have done. I will come and I will take care of the 6 patients that I know that I can take care of, that you didn't plan, that you didn't do that, because I cannot stand in front of the board of nursing and said that you made me. I cannot look at that family because now a baby died. Now someone died. You know what I'll never put down? Their face, because I took 11 patients. No, I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to allow you to do that to me.
I love you. You're awesome. When we talk about let's switch over into documentation a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Another favorite of yours.
Yes, it is.
I saw one of the things that you posted recently was about making sure that you sign your documentation. And one of the places that's really important is on code blue paperwork. And a lot of it, so much of it's done by computer now, but the code blue paperwork too is another one that is interesting. So I'm gonna let you jump into documentation.
Absolutely. So again, in my charting classes, I talk about this as well. And the code blue one is one of the ones that I do talk about. And what you do or do not document is a big deal. All 3 courts of law I just referenced. What's the first thing, Michelle, do you think that we're all going to look at? Is it related to patient care? The medical record.
Yeah.
The medical record. And so what am I looking at? I'm going to be looking at Michelle's documentation under a microscope, right? I'm looking at your words and what you did or did not write, right? And it's going to be the wolf nurse. It's going to be someone far scarier than me that's going to be looking at your documentation. And now it's a code. And it is not necessarily on the computer. And like you said, I've seen it both ways where oftentimes they'll scribble it down because I've taught ACLS before. I taught BLS. So they're scribbling it down. There's nothing, I don't have any problems with that, right? Stuff is happening, especially you're old school nurse. You're not used to the typing. right? Again, I have no problems with that, but you better be comfortable with the form is asking you, and you better write your times down, right? At least have it there so you can look to see. Because I have seen the last time I had to testify in a case, the code sheet was on the big screen. And you know what wasn't done? There's no checkbox that they were bagging the patient. You and I have been thousands of codes, thousands at this point, and I can see it. We're not doing one and not doing the other, right?
Right.
But what wasn't documented? That they were bagging. And the only job, just so those who do not know this, the only job of the code recorder is just that, is to record what is happening and nothing else. And if you cannot assume that role, and I teach this, then don't do it. Because how many people did you just tie into some litigation? Because this is a code. This is a code. I don't think I need to say that again.
Yeah.
So possible litigation, and you do have to sign it. Try to print. If you're writing, make it legible, what you're doing, who's responded, the credentialing behind the people who have responded to the code. And it's okay to say, hey, what's your last name? What is it? Dr. Smith, there's 20 of those. Can I get a first name, MD, what do you got here? There's nothing wrong with that. And if you're not comfortable with that, then don't be the recorder. Then that's not your role, right? And you need to recognize yourself where you're at. And that's why oftentimes it's not a nurse who's been a nurse for 5 minutes, because that you're not comfortable with that. So you can print out that form, even if it's on Epic or Cerner or Meditech and it's in the computer. Go to one of the educators and just say, hey, will you print that out for me, just so I know what I would be asked, like, just so I have a comfortable idea of what those words are. You go to ACLS, you come to me, I'm one of the instructors, and we're doing like a mega code.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm like, you say to me, I'm really uncomfortable with the charting or what they're going to ask me. I want one of the forms. Absolutely. I may not be able to get that to you right then, that second, that class. What's your email, sister? Send that to me and I'll make sure that you get whatever you need. But if you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it. Right. So that's the other thing I tell nurses as well. You got to ask for what you need. So ask for that. And so I talk about that in the code sheet as well. If you're the code responder, you're also not only doing the form that comes along oftentimes on the crash cart, you are also writing a note. And it could just be a paragraph, ROSC, 8 rounds, PEA, GCS 3, medical power of attorney. This is what we did. And you're packing that up because you're exiting left now, right? And you're just packaging that up in a little bow. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. But again, if you're not comfortable doing that, then why are you being the recorder? That's not the quote unquote easy job. It is not.
I would rather run the medicine cart, do CPR, anything. So just for fun, and it's the when I originally started working on my book Dare to Care, I wanted to name it "You Can't Make This Shit Up." So this is another one. One of the nurses as a house supervisor, I get the code sheets and then I take it to the doctor. If it's an ER doctor, have them sign it. They handed me the code blue sheet. There was white out on it.
Oh my gosh, what? Hold on, let's pause here for a moment. Hold on, did you say, could you define that word? What?
Whoopsie.
No way.
White out.
No way.
And it wasn't the new nurse that did it, but the nurse that was actually did the recording, anyway, yes, white out.
Okay, so let's unpack that. So that's like slide number, I don't know, 5 of my course, is that you don't do that. And I also teach that, imagine that on the computer. Now let's move it over to digital. You deleting. No, you strike through and you can say mistaken entry. But when you do that, that's the equivalent of ripping up or whiting out. This is stuff we do not do ever. No.
Yeah, I did not hand that to the doctor and ask them to sign it, by the way.
Strong work. Yeah. Because again, and Michelle unpacked that, because now when you do something like that, you're involving another provider in your fraudulent behavior, and that's unprofessional. Please don't come to me with something that you've altered or something that you've done, and or even expect me to assume a patient from you and the heart rate's 155 and has been for the last 2 hours. What? Yeah. No. And then the patient's bleeding internally. I know you're shocked, But then I'll fast forward, this patient has a bad outcome, and this is a true story. And I assume care normalizing that behavior. No, there's nothing wrong with you as the professional, whether you're a nurse for 5 days or 23 years, to say, so Michelle, so the patient has a heart rate of 155. The order says that you're supposed to call the doctor if it's over 100. So did Dr. Smith get called? Okay, so can you call Dr. Smith? Because this needs to be, and then I'm going to go get a report on patient over here. Sally's going to give me a report and I'll be back.
Yeah, let me know what he says.
Yeah.
And I think people are afraid to do that, but
Yeah.
I do love that holding each other accountable is the direction, in a nice way. It's not unprofessional. It's not unprofessional. You know, it's a 24-hour facility. Yes, it is. So that those hours before I got here, I can't be responsible for them. I
Correct.
can't.
Correct. And it could be just it could be an oversight, but again, that had that happened and the physician was involved, that patient may have gone to the unit and may not have had a bad outcome. But because, people just normalized it, like, okay, by the time it did stumble on to this nurse, right, there was just too much rationalization of why this was normal, and then not holding accountable one another, and it can be done in a professional manner.
And Maggie, how do people look for your course?
Sure. So my website, Advocates for Nurses, number 4 or 4 I don't get it crazy. And it says classes. You just click on that. There's a calendar and you just select the day. January, I'm doing 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then I'm going to record it. I'm trying to refine it, getting feedback from nurses, and I have changed it. Thank you for all the feedback. And then I'm going to record it so then they can just come to my website, and then I'm going to have a live question and answer session that they can come. They take the course, they come back, and then I'll answer questions. So long and short of it, on my website, love to have anyone. It is for CE now, so I am given a CE for that.
Nice. CE is continuing education credit for most. I think, do all states have to have them now, or is it still there's still a
No,
few that don't? I don't think Missouri did
I think
when I
it's
was
so
there.
shocking when I did that research that I guess I just assumed that all of us had to, but I was like, one nurse was like, I don't know, many years ago, she's like, oh no, we don't need CEs. I was like, I don't, what does that mean?
I don't understand these words you're saying.
I'm like, what? Because every state that I've been in requires a certain amount. So,
I know when I was in Missouri, they did not.
and I think that's a discern now. Okay, so that door swings both ways. I think that because if you make it mandatory and it's just you're just checkboxing, you start doing CEs that are not applicable. So I can see that argument, but hopefully if you're doing CEs, you can do it for podcasts. The RNA Gate girls. I don't know if you've met them. You can listen to podcasts done by nurses for nurses, and I've learned some amazing stuff from other nurses and got a CE. So I try to just invest in CEs are interesting to me. So you can get a CE, you can take a charting class.
I love it. I love it. Where do you see nursing profession heading in the next few years?
Oh, it's gonna crumble. It's gonna crumble at first because there's so many things that are happening, right? I mean, you and I, our parents stayed in a job for 30, 40 years. That doesn't happen anymore. So we have a lot of things happening, the change in, AI coming into our world, them trying to eliminate some things. The pandemic crippled us because people like myself, you came into my environment. I already had concerns about what you're doing. And then you took my N95 mask. The only thing that I knew was going to protect me. That insult is a lie. And now you want me to come back, and now you're coming after my pay. So I think that there's going to have to be a huge shift. There is a huge shift with the pay, how we're going to get reimbursed. Systems are going to have to fall and then be rebuilt. All these like freestanding emergency rooms, get out. That's a waste of resources. That's a huge waste of money. Some of these freestanding surgery centers, we're going to have to consolidate some of this stuff and push our resources to where they need to be. But I think that it's the next 5 years, it's going to be, and if we don't stand up, if we don't own our power, we will continue to let things be figured out for us instead of being part of it. So I think it's going to be nurse innovators, creators really stepping up to the plate and saying, no, we're done with letting you create our environment. It's time for us. You've shown us that you're not vested in us nor the patients. And so we're taking this back from you. Now we're done. We're done now.
Yes, yes. That, and it just feels like we're just watching the healthcare system in America just crumble in front of our eyes, and people don't realize it.
Oh,
And
no,
it's
they don't.
scary. It's scary.
People don't understand what's happening because we are the largest workforce. We spend the most face time. When you walk into let's just say a hospital setting, it's nurses. You have done stuff to us that we are never going to recover from. And we're not coming back. These traditional roles, even that have been developed because of AI. Why would I come back into a setting? Why would I come back? And now I could face 3 courts of law, civil, criminal, administrative. Our eyes are way too open now for some of this Mickey Mouse stuff that's happening.
Yeah, for sure. Looking at back, what advice would you like to give young Maggie?
Go to law school.
You would have started there.
And just to know that you're going to have a different journey, a harder journey. That it's okay, you may walk alone, but you're called to something bigger than yourself. I left home at an early age. I actually was going to join the Air Force. I was in ROTC in high school. I was in drill team, and my dad was career Air Force. My grandfather, my sisters went on. My best friend joined. My ex-husband's, best friend joined. I was joining. I went to MEPS. I was joining. I left home when I was 17. I got pregnant, and they were like, yes, 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 but sign your son away right here. And I was like, wait, what? And I was like, because once you're not deployable if you have, to a certain degree, because I have a dependent. You can have a dependent, but you got to be able to sign them. And at the time, I mean, I went on to get married to the man. I mean, we were together since we were 13, but I mean, I just wasn't in my mind at that age. I just wasn't in a place where I was willing to do that. So I went to community college. I just started community college. My grandmother was in the ICU at the Cleveland Clinic. My cousin was a nurse there. And I was like, no, I'm going to be an ICU nurse. So then I pivoted. I had my associate's degree first, and then I didn't, I was in the ICU, the ER, all that. But it wasn't until I'm 15 years in that I go to a board and I see this and I leave. And then I know, like I said, I'm not called to nursing. I'm not called to the business of healthcare. I'm called to my people. I'm called to nurses. Before I leave this world, nurses, all I want for us is a due process. When you're standing in front of your board, that's it. You have rights that are yours under the Constitution in this country.
I love it. Wow, I think we should probably get out of here, even though I could talk to you
Alrighty.
for another hour or so. It was so good talking to you, Maggie. Thank you so much. And we appreciate everything you do and everything you do for nurses. You're amazing. Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much.
And so are
And
you, and all you do, and creating the space for me to come and help advocate for you, for you to have me on so that I can talk to other nurses. I mean, what you're doing is impressive. So thank you for all you're doing, even in your own facility. Because again, if I was a nurse, and I don't think that people realize the house soup is your bestie, and I don't think that they understand sometimes what the role is of the house supervisor. Right, you're part of the administration, but you're still one of us. And truly, I have found alliance with the house soup, right, as a critical care nurse. So thank you for all you do. It sounds like you're amazing within your own facility as well.
thank you. I love that. And all right. Well, thank you all for joining us on Dare to Care with Michelle. We will be talking to you very, very soon. Bye bye.